Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this podcast. So today we're having a great speaker. His name is Wojciech Adamczyk. Did I say it correctly?
Yes, correct. Hello.
Yeah. He is Polish, 29 years old, and currently he lives in Warsaw, Poland. And he's one of my friends. We met in London when we took our masters. He graduated from King's College London in Master of Science in China and Globalisation. And he's currently studying for the postgraduate diploma in the corporate finance and accounting in the Warsaw School of Economics. So, hi,
That's
Wojtek.
good. Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you as well for allocating your valuable time to talk with us. It's going to be a great conversation, I guess.
It's a pleasure. Well, I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, Wojtek, for our listeners, can you tell us about maybe a bit yourself, maybe your work or interest?
Well, of course. Currently, I live in Warsaw for 3 years. Since I graduated, I returned from the UK to Poland, and I decided to continue my higher education. Though it turns out that I landed a job at Accenture, and I spent there a couple of months. Meanwhile, I was engaged in various educational leadership programs like the Polish Promoting Diplomats or the Leadership School of Freedom Institute, pretty renowned locally in Warsaw or across Poland, of course, not in Indonesia. Well, currently for 2 years, I've been working with an audit office as a junior accountant. Though I still try to keep pace with my interests and hobbies, which are modern China and Chinese economic transformation, as well as traveling, though, as you all know, pandemic has started, traveling and reading good non-fictional literature. What I might say more is that, well, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Sure. So basically, now you live in Warsaw. Maybe I have a question regarding the life in Poland, bro. How is life there, bro? I mean, during this pandemic, how is it there? Is it okay, or maybe the waves of coronavirus?
Well, the life sucks anywhere else across the world. Though we survive it. In fact, our government has decided to release lose on the restrictions, and from next week, some cultural and sport facilities, along with the hotels and restaurants, are going to be opened. Though the third wave hit us hard, and it was pretty disastrous in consequences for us. Infections have surged since early March, and on April 3rd hit the highest daily level, and it reached approximately nearly 1,000 cases per 100,000 inhabitants, which was the third highest figure in the European Union. Deaths have surged to record levels, and the number of people in hospitals and on ventilators, of course, with COVID-19 have also touched all-time highs. Though right now we are observing that the numbers of contracted people with contracted virus are decreasing, and nobody that much cares because the spring has come. We've got more sunny days, and people are getting crazy, literally saying about going out and dealing with their own lives in a proper way, just like before the pandemic. So this is something that has stricken all of the world, and Poland cannot be named as an exemplary model of counteracting the waves of pandemic, but overall, I would say that we stood the ground.
Yeah. Have you been vaccinated?
Yes, I was. I was in the first cohort of people that were allowed to get a vaccine. I got Pfizer's jab, and it was around the new year. So it's been a couple of months since then.
Yeah. In Indonesia here, we get Sinovac. Sinovac, how do you say it? Yeah, so the vaccine from China. Well, I'm very interested about the topic in Poland, because since now I have a great speaker, and then maybe I can ask some questions. And also this is based on your expertise, right? So because you focus on politics and also in globalization and development. If I may know, several months ago I saw on the news that there was a big protest in Poland. If I'm not mistaken, it's about abortion. Yeah. What did happen? Can you tell us about the story, bro?
Well, you got prepared. I see you are keen on the policy issues. That's excellent. Well, in fact, it was a big issue in eyes of some people, specifically women. It was just evil. Abortion law divides our society for years. It divided our society for years. But last year and this year, it erupted to become an apex of total anger, total ire of pro-choice circles, groups of people, especially young generations, that took to the streets and massively opposed the government's decision. For those who are listening and are not familiar with the issue, the mass protests that erupted in October were about ruling by the Constitutional Court that found that a 1993 law allowing abortion in cases of severe and irreversible fetal abnormalities was just unconstitutional. Just a matter of fact, to add up, in 2019, a year before, 98% of abortions were carried out on those grounds, meaning that the ruling effectively banned the vast majority of pregnancy terminations. It just made it nearly impossible to get a termination of the pregnancy. The ruling, of course, provoked outrage from supporters, and apparently, because of the second wave of the pandemic, the government got surprised, even shocked by the turnout of people massively taking to the streets, not only in the major cities, but across the whole country, even in the smallest towns, even in my hometown, in southern part of Poland, in Wica, where there were some singular events in support for pro-choice groups. Well, of course, there is a background about that. For that, the key word for that is Catholic Church. Catholic Church and the current governing party, Land Justice Party, in the coalition with United Right, with other minor parties that creates the government in Poland. Well, the ties are that strong between the Catholic Church and conservative government that the mission, like subjectively speaking, is to preserve or maintain the order of the past decades to be unchanged, I would say.
Yeah.
And Of course, society opposes that. Opinion polls are showing that nearly 2/3 of polls are in favor of abortion. Of course, in terms of the abortion law from 1993 concerning the fetal and abnormalities, fetal issues and abnormalities during the pregnancy. But anyway, it's 2/3 of the whole nation. So that clearly shows the split, the division between the society in the country, and that was the main causation of the protest.
Yeah.
After a court ruling and imposing a new total ban, it was in January on 20th or 21st of January on abortions. People once again, after long weeks of struggle on the streets, went out to protest, especially in Warsaw, in the capital city, and there were some reports of brutal orders from like sub-bottom commandment, brutal reaction of police officers with pepper spray against those protesting against the changes.
Yeah, it happens everywhere, right? Like in the US also, police brutality is a case, right? When there's a big demonstration.
Yeah, that's true. Though right now, well, it seems that everything got back to normal. We are occupied by different issues. There are different things put on the agenda. As you are talking as a friend, I would say that women had lost the battle just because the rest of the society hasn't turned to massively support them in the struggle to fight for the freedom of choice, because personally speaking, it's all about personal choices and freedom of our will.
All right.
Yeah.
So I have a very interesting question on that. Poland is one of the most religious countries in the Europe, right? With Catholic faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
This means
true.
that the population naturally should lean towards against abortion, because like you are religious, so it means that word of God, you should not really abort the baby. But how come there was this massive voice on pro-choice narrative? If you have a stance on that or view on that.
Well, life goes on. The times are changing. The wind of changes has come to Poland many years ago, and even if the massive process of pro-choice groups could be pretty sudden, seem to be sudden and unexpected, as for the international observers, it had been brewing for some time, I would say. In fact, if you would return to 2016, the leftist party Razem, United, or Together, my apologies for the bad translation, Together, had organized some street protests when, for the first time after long years, there was the first draft raised in Polish Parliament on abortion law, and it also mobilized hundreds of thousands of young people to oppose, to try to prevent the changes in the law. So, like by the chance, on the other hand, it shows for how long the issue of the abortion lasts in Poland, because 2016 was already 5 years ago. So It was called Black Protest, China Protest. Demonstrations were led by party members from the Lewica party, leftist party. What's funny, what's interesting for you is that the leader was the leader's surname was the same as mine, Adamczyk. She was Małgorzata Adamczyk, and it was a part of a larger campaign of which people published selfies in black clothing, calling the Black Fridays as the Black Protest Days or something like that. And in the subsequent days, similar protests outbursted in different cities.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, it is important to remember that the struggle of Poles, like the division of society, and the rise of liberal point of views in the country aren't uncommon. And you would be surprised, because so far you haven't visited me in Warsaw, how Warsaw, for instance, or big cities are transformed or liberal. It's rather, I don't want to stereotypize the picture of Polish society, but some people say, or some polls shows that after all of the major elections, the division between supporters of more liberal pro-European parties and against more conservative parties are split by the cities for liberals and countryside for conservative.
Yeah.
And that's the major problem. So, well, pro-choice exists, and pro-choice has its own right.
Because of this liberal, narrative that has been rising. Because I think it happens because maybe social media, because Polish people or Polish are exposed to globalization, and so this also entails many things in terms of their perspective, right? So I'm gonna pivot the topic a bit, if you don't mind, because of this, this liberal view, right? There has been a rising narrative in populism and nationalistic tendencies in the European area, right? Some even claims as far-right movement because they're a bit racist and all. And this is the bad news for European Union, right? Is it happening in Poland now?
Well, thanks for the question. It's really intriguing how the Indonesians think on the rise of nationalism in Europe. From my perspective, this is a great concern. A concern that has been becoming more and more divisive issue in terms of the prospects for the future of the European Union. If it exists in Poland, yes, it exists, and it has some support among young people from various parts of the country. Though, if you would stick to just Polish far right, then I would say that Poland's far right scene is hard to quantify, but observers say the numbers are limited. Like, since 20 years, there is once a year in November during our festival, the Independence Day, on 11th of November. All of the nationalists, far-right groups, and some people call them extremists or Nazis, are gathers in Warsaw
I
for the
was
match.
hesitant to say the words, the N words, but as
Yeah,
you mentioned it, yeah, so okay, you
yeah.
sorry for cutting you off.
They're celebrating the Independence Day, and this is an exemplary uh, projection of power, but illusionary power, in fact. I would say that far-right groups account for less than 200,000 supporters across Poland. Maybe they have some more neutral or more positively more appealed people to some their proposals, but in fact, from my perspective, it is a great danger. But if it will be prevented, and if society will strongly say no or oppose the actions taken by these groups, though, as a matter of fact, all of the totalitarian point of views, ideological point of views, whether it is Nazism or communism, according to the Polish constitution, are forbidden. You may go to prison for promotion of this use. And well, across the Europe, in general picture, across the Europe, it poses a threat. It is a great challenge for the neoliberalists or liberals, but in Poland there must be a distinguishable notice about the difference between the Law and Justice Party and the Confederation that represents the far right in the government, because the Justice Party, in fact, even if it emboldens or bolsters the actions taken by far right groups, shouldn't be considered as the far right as it is in the mainstream media across the world.
Yeah. All right. So, in your perspective, given the few years back, there was some trends of European countries exiting European Union, right? In your perspective, do you think that being a member of European Union or EU benefits Poland as a country? I'm just asking about your perspective, if if you don't mind.
Well, definitely it benefits all of the countries that joined the European Union, that creates the European Union, and I hardly see any disadvantages, any backdoors for the membership. Truly, in my subjective opinion, I'm in support for the further integration of the European Union. But just to give an example, yesterday was the 1st of May, am I right?
Yes, true.
It was
May
the
Day,
17th,
right?
Yeah, it was the 17th anniversary of Poland joining the European Union, because in 2004, on 1st of May, Poland, along with a group of few countries from Central Eastern Europe, had become official members of the community. And when it comes to simple calculation, whether it was a good or bad choice, I would strongly state that Poland only benefited from the membership.
Yes, sir.
Mainly economically speaking, which we may talk later on some facts and figures, and societally, the living standards of living and freedoms that we have received, our generation, my generation, maybe not, but the next generation, like born in the 21st century, lives in a totally different reality, but in different German or French or Spanish. Yeah, but that has to be my subjective opinion. So that's why it's not that meritorical in
but I somewhat agree with you, man. I mean, like, we are pro globalization, right? And I think unionizing or grouping of countries could be beneficial for all the members as long as the deal is beneficial. You know, it's about how you actually build the deal from the ground up, right? And also, I'm a bit not triggered, I'm a bit annoyed by some stories or narrative from the media that this rising narrative in populism or nationalistic tendencies, all the far right movement or Nazism, as you said before, this is mostly triggered by immigration issue. What do you think about that? Is it really only about immigration, or your view?
Well, that's hard. For the far right, because of anti-immigration moods was always the cornerstone of the goals and efforts that they are making to get to the power, and definitely the influx of migrants in 2015 to Europe had changed something, and it boosted the moods or like attitudes of racist people and xenophobes against putting pressure on the particular governments to not to welcome refugees, mostly from the Middle East region. Though I would say it is a false narrative in terms of thinking that it is the only thing that bolstered the position of the far right across the Europe in the last years. Definitely, the migrant crisis had triggered some processes that brought some consequences, fatal consequences to the outlook, to the perception of people, casual, ordinary people on migrants. But in my mind, it is just about the failure of liberal vision of life, and when it comes to the Poles clearly shows that even Polish people right now would support inviting refugees to our country. I mean, it's normal that you see it as a truly frightening and abnormal situation when people deny the entrance of the war refugees to the countries. But I guess it wasn't the role of the far right itself. It was the role of the governments that were bolstered by the public opinion debate that turned out to be heated in the social media or mainly in the internet, where Land Justice Party in Poland just took the stance to not to invite but help at the place in exchange, on the place. It's bullshit. We tried saying many people lost the trust in this party. I was one of them. I was fully in a full support of at least partially helping refugees in our country, partially because of the historical legacy of Polish people during the Second and First World War,
Yeah.
and partially because of my political point of views. But well, I want to anything surprising or something or mind changing. I mean, migrant issue was a problem, but I think that the roots of the problem are
It's the government.
enrooted are enrooted much deeper, and it's all about the crisis that the European nations citizens are suffering from in terms of disappointment and role and the functioning of the systems of the governance across Europe.
Yeah. I agree on that. Yeah. I mean, I agree on that. I had this discussion with one of my friends as well. He said that this, nationalistic tendencies not only triggered by immigration solely. I mean, this immigration is just a trigger, but the main problem is because of the fact that this globalization agenda actually left many people behind. So many people get angry because of that as well. Do you agree on that view?
Well, that's exactly what I was trying to say. Just missing the word globalization, not neoliberalism. Like people got just pissed off of many aspects of life, and many hundreds of millions of people across the European Union are dissatisfied with how the EU and how the particular governments are dealing with some particular reforms and issues, and pandemic as well has added up to it, and it's like that. The globalization. Well, we might pose the question whether the processes of deglobalization have started already.
Yeah, that's
true. Or it's just a temporary thing, and the reglobalizational issues will return and we will live as normal. Because the example of Germany that welcomed more than 1 million Germans have clearly shown that it wasn't anything disastrous, bad, or fatal in the consequences. And after a few years, the refugees that settled in Germany are integrating into societies, learning languages, getting jobs, almost fully employed. And in fact, it helps Germany, not in opposite way.
Yeah. All right, very interesting, bro. Thank you very much for your perspective on that. Lastly, if you still have time, man, I want to ask about the economy. Poland has been enjoying. Yeah, man. Poland has been enjoying a robust growth for several decades, right? Relative to other post-communism countries. Can you tell me, maybe if you have any insight, what did Poland do differently to achieve this robust and sustainable growth?
Well, normally, if you would come to Poland, to Warsaw, to any other city across the country, and randomly ask the person about what does that person think on the economic situation of Poland, definitely 3 out of 4 as people would deny that everything's good. They would rather be pessimistic or negative on the outcome, on the results of our transformation. There since I have studied international relations, politics, political economy, and politics at all for 10 years, with the economic, specifically with economic focus, by taking the picture that embraces 30 years since the transformation had begun, we might observe, I'm not afraid to say it, a miracle issue, a miraculous sustainable development of Poland with no interruption and with no dire consequences of some brave dire reforms that were taking throughout the years by different governments. Just to say, an uninterrupted pace of high growth averaging 4.2% per annum between 1992 until 2019 clearly shows something. And Poland is steadily catching up with Western Europe, with the rest of the world, more industrialized world, and has become the 7th or even the 6th largest economy in the EU, with the total GDP amounting for more or less 550 billion US dollars GDP. The purchase power parity index has been increasing. We're catching up with Portugal, we are catching up with Greece, we are catching up with South Europe, that these countries are members of the European Union for much longer period. We've gone through drastic, radical rule of law reforms that, by the way, there won't be a chance to discuss it, but are also put on the threats in terms of deterioration of the rule of law in Poland. But in general, if you would take a picture of 30 years long journey of young lady that right now turns out to be 31 and is blonde and blue-eyed and so on, pretty tall and thin, is something that makes Poland a promising place for the next generations. There's a question to pose. What if you would ask mothers of young Polish children, whether do they feel safe about the future of their children in our country, whether it would be better, whether it will be better or worse? I guess 99% would convincingly say that they feel pretty convinced and safe about the fact that the Polish economy and Polish standards of living and security and societal issues will only improve.
Yeah, because it has been very stable in Poland as well for the last few decades. Yeah. Wow, man. Thank you very much for your time. This is so insightful, and I believe that many of the followers and listeners would really love to hear from you more next time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I mean, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. I hope we can talk again next time. Do you have anything else to say? Maybe 1 or 2 words for the followers or anything?
well, of course, I would love to wish you Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy, and good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna close this conversation, and then I hope we can talk again next time. And if I invite you, please please come so that we can talk about any other topics. Okay.
Cool.
Sure.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, Wojciech.
Yeah. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
See ya.